Clair Barrus is a retired cloud platform engineer. He has a passion for skiing, hiking, and Mormon history, and we're really excited for your topic today.
Thank you. And I'm grateful to Michelle and Cheryl for putting this conference on and giving me the opportunity to share something. I wanted to point out two books really quickly. Margaret has a book called Strangers in Paradox. If you want to look at the really cool theological issues that she kind of alluded to, her and her husband put that together a few years ago, and it's a great thing to pursue and learn more about Joseph Smith and his theological ideas. And I was talking to Barbara, and she said, hey, you ought to plug the book Solemn Covenant, which has, I think, several of the presenters, Secret Covenants. Solemn Covenants was a long time ago. Secret Covenants, and several of the presenters have chapters in there. And I think a particular interest is Mark Tensmeyer's chapter, which I think is essential reading for anyone exploring the polygamy. Was Joseph Smith a polygamist or not? You have to read Mark's article if you want to be educated on the topic. So I recommend stopping by the signature table and maybe picking up a copy of that. Okay, I'm going to speak about Heber C. Kimball's Lawless Women Revelation. How many of you women, and how many of you men are associated with a lawless woman? How many of you are lawless women out there? Okay, and I see more male hands than female hands. So that's telling. That's very interesting. All right. Not long after his death. Let me get situated here real quick. There we go. Not long after his death, a book used for record keeping by Heber C. Kimball was found by his family. It contained records such as items received while crossing the plains, baptismal and ordinance dates, genealogical information, and so on. Towards the end of the book, an important discovery was made, titled H.C. Kimball's Memorandum. It was used by Heber C. Kimball to record a series of revelations he received between 1852 and 1864. Referring to the memorandum book, his son noted, quote, after Father died, we found in a blank book where he had jotted down some of the things the Lord had told him. Heber C. Kimball was an early convert to the church, becoming a member of the original Quorum of the 12, and eventually a member of the first presidency as a counselor to his good friend Brigham Young. He was a charismatic individual, seeing his first vision at the age of 9, and reporting visions, revelations, signs in the heavens, and other spiritual manifestations throughout his life. Most of the 21 revelatory items in his memorandum book were prophetic in nature, giving predictions of future events. These prophecies predicted a division of states between the North and South, when the occupying soldiers of Johnston's army would leave, a period of sickness and mourning, 2 revelations about the U.S. making war with the church, that he would be blessed among the saints, that he would be favored by Brigham Young above all others, and that the U.S. would reject the church's petition for statehood, and that he could have 25 additional years of life if he desired, plus several revelations predicting that Kimball would be lifted up while sorrow would befall other leaders, such as fellow church presidency counselor Daniel H. Wells. Only 4 entries were not prophecies, 3 of which share the same date, February 3rd, 1852. This paper looks closely at these 3 items from this date. In one of these items, he was told that he had fulfilled the law of lawless women, thus freeing him from such spirits, that he should devote his entire time to those who would listen to him. The text of the revelation is as follows. My son Heber, He shall devote his entire time to the cause of God and to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he shall not be under the law of lawless women any more in time, as he has fulfilled the law and is now free from such spirits. And the said time shall be devoted to the humble and obedient, and those that shall listen. 3 entries bearing the same date appear to be the 3 attempts by Kimball to correctly articulate this revelation. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll refer to the first 2 words of each of the 3 versions to identify which version we're discussing. We'll call this one the My Son version. This cryptic revelation is steeped in esoteric language, obscuring its meaning. The curious revelations raises a number of questions. Who were the lawless women? What law had Kimball fulfilled? Who or what were the spirits? And how is he free from such spirits? Light can be shed on these questions by looking at the context of this revelation, related documents, dating, and mid-19th century Mormon theology. A second item of the same date is short and in faded pencil and says simply, Mr. K shall devote his entire time. We'll call this one the Mr. K version. Note that after addressing Kimball, the Mr. K and the My Son versions both state that, quote, he shall devote his entire time, close quote, making it clear that these are both attempts to write the same revelation. For reasons unknown, this version was aborted partway through the first sentence. Evidence suggests that this short version was the first draft. The date was corrected from 1862 to 1852, while the other versions had the correct date. Kimball was addressed tersely as Mr. K, while subsequent versions were more polished and had additional content. A third item with the same date also discusses lawless women and shares text with the first 2 items. The revelation begins differently with, the Spirit said I should, instead of my son Heber he shall, or Mr. K shall. We'll call this one the Spirit version. The Spirit version continues in Heber's voice, while the other 2 are in the voice of the Lord. This version also contains the most text, adding additional conceptual text where the My Son version ends. While the My Son version is entirely in the voice of the Lord, the Spirit version begins in Heber's voice, but changes from his voice to the Lord's voice when the additional text is added. The additional text also contains information that helps better understand what the revelation is about. Quote, those who shall listen, quote, to my counsel and shall have faith in my counsel and shall listen to his law, for he is my servant, and I will stand by him, and those who will not build him up shall not prosper. I mean, those of his house shall not prosper, and peace shall not be with them. They shall see sorrow except they repent. The additional text in the Spirit version provide clues as to who the lawless women are. The phrase, those of this house, indicates that these are problems occurring within his household. The women in his house apparently would not listen to his law and would not build him up. This tells us that the lawless women were disobedient wives who were not humble and would not listen to the law of their husband Heber. In early 1842, Heber took his first plural wife, Sarah Peake Noon. In the fall of 1844, after Joseph Smith's death, Kimball married 11 more wives, 3 more in the late winter, 22 in the winter of 45-46, and another one in 1848. After nearly an 8-year break, he married 4 more wives in 1856, and the last one in 1857, for a total of 43 wives. Kimball's most productive period of marrying occurred in February 1846. On the 3rd, he married 10 women. The following day, he married 2 more wives, and the following day, 5 more. And in my research, I could find no information on the honeymoon. Kimball received the Lawless women revelation on the 6th anniversary of the day he married 10 women, the most women he ever married in a single day. Not much imagination is needed to surmise that managing such a large household would have its share of problems. A grandson noted that Kimball, quote, was often heard to declare that the plural order of marriage, with its manifold cares and perplexities, had cost him a bushel of tears, close quote. In the 9 months previous to the revelation, he had divorced twice and would go through a separation and divorce in the next 2 months. Eventually, a total of 16 wives would leave him. Mormonism incorporated a hierarchical, patriarchal approach in how church and family were viewed. For example, the 2 months after receiving the Lawless women revelation, he preached, "Some have said that I was very presumptuous to say that Brother Brigham was my God and Savior. Brother Joseph was his God, and the one that gave Joseph the keys of the kingdom was his God, which was Peter, and Jesus Christ was his God." This hierarchical model extended into the home. For example, referring to Jesus' statement, "If you love me, keep my commandments," Kimball said, "If you love brothers Brigham, Heber, and Jedediah, and the 12, please to keep our commandments that are given to you from day to day, and you will be blessed and exalted. I do not a woman," meaning a wife, "to tell me that she loves me when she does not keep my commandments, for her statement would be vague and foolish." The statement assumes a hierarchical priority where church members are obedient to the commandments of church leaders and wives are obedient to the commandments of their husbands. It was presumed that Kimball's wives would receive exaltation through his priesthood, while he, in turn, would be saved by Brigham Young, who would be saved by Joseph, and so on. Another time, Kimball spoke of the importance of hierarchical roles in maintaining happiness, hinting at some of his own marital strife. Quote, "Now suppose my wives and my children would take the same course to please me and be subject to me, as I am to Brother Brigham. Would there be any sorrow or confusion or broils? No, there would be no sorrow. There would be no blues in my family. I am never blue when I do Brother Brigham's will, but when I do not do it, I begin to grow blue." Just as he had begun marrying 22 of his wives in the winter of 1845, he addressed the Holy Order, a quorum of those who had received temple rights, where each woman had covenanted to obey the law of her husband. Speaking of marriage covenants, Kimball, quote, spoke of the necessity of women being in subjection to their husbands. "I am subject to my God, my wife is in subjection to me, and will reverence me in my place, and I will make her happy. I do not want her to step forward and dictate to me any more than I dictate to President Young." This idea continued to be taught in LDS discourse into the modern era and was part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint temple endowment, where women covenanted to obey the law of their husbands until 1990. Since then, the covenant was softened and finally removed. Many fundamentalist communities, though, have kept the wording of the original covenant. In 1995, the idea that men preside in the home was codified in the LDS Proclamation on the Family. Kimball may have been referencing temple teachings when he wrote to his first wife, Vilate, or it could be Violet, Vilate. People kind of debate how to pronounce her name. He wrote to her in 1849, telling his wife to teach his other plural wives, quote, "to mind their own business and treat their husband with respect and let my business alone and hold their tongues when they wanted to speak evil of me." regarding the text of his revelation that, quote, he shall not be under the law of lawless women anymore, close quote, Kimball felt some of his wives were lawless in that they would not follow his law. He was instead subjected to them rather than they being subjected to him. The revelation indicated that though he had fulfilled their law, or in other words, endured enough of them dictating to him, and that he was now free from such spirits and free to ignore them while remaining devoted only to the, quote, humble and obedient wives, those who shall listen to him. Note the term in time used in the text. He should not be under the law of lawless women any more in time. This phrase seems to indicate that even though he was essentially terminating his relationship with these wives in this life, that relationship might continue on in eternity. In Mormonism, some marriages were designated for time only, meaning marriages were valid in this life only, while eternal marriages were valid in the next life. And other marriages were for both time and eternity. In 1857, Kimball proposed a possible dialogue that might occur upon his death when meeting Joseph Smith in the spirit world. Here we are, Brother Joseph. We are here ourselves, are we not, with none of the property we possessed in our probationary state, not even the rings on our fingers. And I'm trying to imagine Kimball with all those rings on his fingers. 43, I think. He will say to us, come along, my boys, where are your wives? They are back yonder. They would not follow us. Never mind, says Joseph. Here are thousands. Have all you want. Perhaps the revelation gave Kimball permission to end some of his time-only marriages in divorce or separation, or to ignore some of his time and eternity wives until the next life, freeing up more of his time to devote to the church. We can see this revelation taking form through the various versions. The earliest attempt at dictating the revelation was aborted partway through the first sentence. His relationship with the Lord is formal and distant as he is addressed as Mr. K. The My Son version is likely the next version of the revelation. It is written cryptically and metaphorically, with his wives referred to as spirits rather than wives. In this version, Kimball is addressed warmly by the Lord as my son. The Spirit version, is the longest of the three. The voice is that of Kimball's, who says the Spirit had told him these things. Note that all three have approximately the same text stating that he should devote his entire time to the church. With some variation, the first section of the Spirit version follows the content of the My Son version. However, there's additional text where the My Son version ends. Here, the voice shifts back to the first-person voice of the Lord. The text was apparently added to help explain the preceding cryptic text. One of the memorandum prophecies, plus a number of other prophecies, were given through what was called the Lord Rod, a rod given to Kimball, which he received revelations. Kimball had received a 3.5-foot rod from Joseph Smith in 1842, through which he received at least 10 revelations. His son noted, quote, anything that was his right to know, all he had to do was kneel down with the rod in his hand, and that sometimes the Lord would answer his question before he had time to ask them. While it is not stated, it is possible that Kimball used his divining rod to receive the lawless women revelation. The memorandum book is a treasure trove providing a look at over a dozen of the personal prophecies and revelations of a member of the First Presidency. All of the revelations in the memorandum book, Kimball put more effort into developing the lawless women revelation than any other. With 3 versions, we get a glimpse of his process of articulating and refining revelation. It may be that Kimball felt moved to pen this revelation as he pondered the anniversary of his wedding to 10 wives in the Nauvoo temple 6 years earlier, with the corresponding difficulties that had ensued. He found happiness by strictly following Brigham Young as if Young were his God. Kimball felt his wives would find happiness through strict obedience to him. The theology introduced by Joseph Smith and expanded by Brigham Young defined a hierarchical, patriarchal framework as the standard for Latter-day Saints. Young saw the accumulation of wives and their subsequent progeny as a way to add glory and increase to a man's kingdom. Kimball engaged in this ideal, embracing plural marriage more than almost any other man. However, his attempt to practice this form of marriage did not produce a heavenly family on earth. Too many of his wives were independent-minded, wanting a say in how they lived their shared lives with their largely absent husband. He embraced the principle of plural marriage, practicing it with a vengeance, but he was severely tried with the practical implementation of large-scale polygamy. He sought God's blessing to avoid the sorrow and anguish he felt in his complex family life, and penned a revelation giving him divine permission to ignore all but his compliant wives. According to the revelation, God allowed him to turn his back on independent-minded wives with the prediction that sorrow would befall the lawless women of his family. Thank you. I think we have a couple of minutes, 5 minutes for Q&A. I think you probably want to make sure you speak in the microphone.
I love this, but when I was at BYU, I did some kind of research on the first wives. I found that they were so independent, they were outspoken, they were well-read, they were well writing, like they wanted the vote, and what you've just shown me is in a strange way, because of these large polygamous families, the absent husband allowed these women to kind of reach their higher self, right? They didn't have the totalitarian ruling over them. So it made them rise up. And then is kind of the next generation. Brigham Young wanted them more genteel, bring the piano in, be the more East Coast woman. But the first ones, the pioneering ones, were so powerful. And do you see like these kind of powerful women stepping up? And he just can't ring them all in, right, to the herd, because they each have their own voice.
Yeah, it's complicated. He has so many wives, and there is some new data that is going to be published before long, actually by Signature Book, about his different wives, and that will provide glimpses into each of their personalities and their own individual stories. And I think there are probably examples of exactly what you're talking about, and there are probably other examples. We have such a large database of women that I think we will probably see a variety of motivations and actions and personality types that occur among those. Anyone else?
I just had an epiphany while I was listening to your talk, Claire. I always thought that polygamy was dangerous for women, but now I get another picture of how it's dangerous for men. They could be inviting a mutiny, and I just thought that was interesting. If you have any comments about that.
Well, yeah, it's a good point. And I made the point, some have claimed, his biographer claimed he is the most married man in the modern Western world. And the problem is, as I pointed out, that when you have large-scale polygamy, you're inherently going to run into all sorts of difficulties. How do you financially provide? How do you spend quality time with people? And it's just not possible at all. And I think this illustrates that large-scale polygamy is just not a very practical recipe for a good, happy family life.
Just a quick question about the rod that Heber used. I had read that the casket from Joseph Smith, it was made into canes, and I thought Heber received one of those canes with part of the casket of Joseph Smith in it. And so I always thought that was the rod that Heber used to try and receive revelations through. But can you straighten me out on...
No. Yeah, he received his rod from Joseph Smith. It was probably in 1844, and his first entry in his journals are before Joseph Smith. It's in June of 1844, or it might have been May 1844, a couple of months before Joseph Smith's death. But he dreamed that he had received a rod from Joseph Smith in 1837 when he was crossing the ocean to the British mission. And then it appears that it was fulfilled. Heber received a rod, and also apparently Brigham Young, probably Orson Hyde. There may have been other apostles who received rods from Joseph Smith. That's all the time we have. Thank you.